Greetings and welcome to a wet and cold Gauteng. You're watching You and Your Money. I'm Bryan and tonight our topic deals with healthcare. There's an overwhelming amount of daily reading material related to the business of financial planning. What continues to amaze me is how few publications fail to address the topics of healthcare and wellness programs. Many of the articles I read are consistently highlighting the growing prevalence of poor lifestyle choices, often linked to heart disease, stroke, diabetes, anxiety, and depression. A recurring theme in the discussion around wellness is the encouragement for individuals to actively engage in these programs, not only to improve their overall health, but also with the potential benefit of qualifying for more affordable medical scheme options. And joining this evening from the Zoom room in Cape Town is Kevin Aaron, Principal Officer, MedShield Medical Scheme. Kevin, it's good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Bryan. Always a pleasure to join you and your listeners. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, Kevin, you know, I can't move without technology. It's absolutely amazing. Whatever I do, my son is so impatient with me when he tries to teach me. And I think all of us parents at our age are finding the same difficulty. But technology has taken over everything we do. Please give some context on how medical schemes are using technology both to predict high-cost cases and possibly to prevent fraud.
Thank you, Bryan, and you're right. I mean, there's no doubt we can't operate without technology. And, certainly when I look at AI, there are many aspects of AI that medical schemes, medical administrators are starting to look at and use to help not only from a member servicing perspective, but very importantly to try identify and reduce the cost of high cost admissions coming through. Let me give you just a couple of examples of some of the stuff that we look at. On the member servicing side, we use some AI, which we call a lapse predictor model, which looks at claims. It looks at members that are phoned into our call center. It identifies certain words, and it tries to predict quite accurately members actually that may not be happy with something, whether it's their benefits, whether it's claims that are not paid, whether it's service that they got. And it actually highlights to us those members, and we can proactively contact those members to see, is there a problem? Can we address their problem before they get frustrated and may actually want to consider using another medical aid? But I think just as importantly, there's other aspects that we're looking at, not unique just to MedShield, which are really important. And I just want to just give a couple of examples. I mean, the one that we're testing at the moment is technology that when a member goes in for a hospital event, it actually tries to predict whether that member will end up with a readmission. So it'll look at various factors. It'll look at their claims history, their age, their risk profile, what the condition is, and it'll score them, and it'll tell you, is there a chance that this member actually may end up having a costly readmission? And what you then do is you can again then proactively contact the member. You can contact the member the day they've been discharged. A perfect example would be wound care. Many patients actually are discharged. They have a wound. The wound needs to be cared for. It needs to be looked after. If it's not, it gets septic. The member ends up back in hospital. It's a P&B, and it becomes an incredibly expensive case because you're now dealing with septicemia. So this AI technology actually tries to predict those members that could end up. We're testing it, and we're finding that the level of accuracy is incredibly high. It's not just things like wound care. It's other things. So where you contact the member to say, how are you feeling? You link it to wearable devices where you may pick up some abnormalities. You contact the member and you say to them, listen, I think you need to go see your specialist, because if they don't, ultimately it's a readmission or it's an emergency center. Another one that we're using through Johns Hopkins, again, is AI that's able to look at data, big data, and it can tell you who are your high-risk patients, and it can tell you with a high degree of accuracy which of those patients are likely to end up in hospital in the following year. And again, with that information, you're able to engage them, you're able to look at whether they're compliant to the medication. Many of them are chronic, they multi-chronic, multi-morbid. All of this AI is intended to try proactively identify something that could go wrong, that if you can intervene early enough, you can channel that member to their healthcare provider before it's too late. So there's so many aspects. We're also testing, as an example, some AI, a facial scan, where you look at your cell phone. It's crazy. You look at your cell phone for 30 seconds, and behind the scenes, it actually takes 20 clinical readings, and then it risk rates you, and it guides our health coaches as to whether you are low, medium, or high risk. And depending on that, we're able to intervene at different levels. So AI is here. It's here to stay. From a fraud perspective, AI again and big data analysis is critical. I mean, medical schemes in the old format, the administration systems were not geared to deal with big data. They deal with claims data, one, as the event comes in. And what you have now with AI, you have tools they can sift through millions, hundreds of millions of lines of claims data. They can look at profiles, they can look at outliers, and they can flag stuff. And these tools are being used by medical schemes again to flag outliers where there's more in-depth human intervention, looking at the detail to try identify whether there's any fraud, waste, and abuse. So in conclusion, I would say AI doesn't take over everything. You still need manual intervention, you need clinical expertise, but AI is definitely becoming more prevalent in the medical scheme space. And most administrators are embracing and using it for many different aspects.
Well, fabulous summary, but let's talk about how that helps the member. One, if we can keep the member healthier, it'll reduce costs. Two, if we can identify possible problems that the member should be thinking about and dealing with their doctors and physicians, then that could also help in terms of them maybe reducing, ultimately being healthier, wellness, and then being able to control costs. And thirdly, fraud is a big contributor, which we'll talk about a bit later, a big contributor to cost. But what is the general state of the medical scheme industry with consolidation, and are there schemes in trouble?
Bryan, there are schemes in trouble. I think that if you look at the number of medical schemes over the last 10 years, you'll see, especially in the open scheme market, there has been consolidation. There's been quite significant consolidation, and I expect that this consolidation will continue. Healthcare is really the medical scheme industry is one area where the sort of motto size counts really does apply, because I think with size, you get efficiencies of scale, your costs of administering become lower because you can spread it over a higher base. But very importantly, your negotiating power with healthcare providers in terms of negotiating better tariffs, discounts, better deals is far greater when you actually have size. And for many schemes, the complexity of medical aid and the complexity of actually running a medical aid when you've got 10 or 15 or 20,000 principal members, it just doesn't make economic sense. So I think that you will continue to find consolidation. It's going to speed up. I think that the number of open schemes in the market will probably shrink down to maybe 6 or so. And there are schemes that are in trouble. It's only recently that it was in the public domain, so I can say it, that two open schemes have reported solvency that's below the 25%. One of them significantly below the 25%. Medical schemes are now starting to publish their financial statements, so members can go onto their scheme website and see the financial statements. And, it's an industry where you cannot say for certainty that things are going to be great every year. And then again, that's one of the reasons of consolidation, is that you build a bigger risk, you build more reserves, and that creates a buffer for you when you have bad times, because there are going to be years when medical schemes have good years and they make surpluses, but there are years that they're going to be deficits, and you don't want to counter those deficits all the time with very high contribution increases to counter. And that's why you need a scheme with high levels of solvency to buffer those headwinds when they come along. So I think the consolidation will increase, and there are schemes that, in my opinion, are if not already in trouble, are heading towards trouble.
Okay, so let's talk about the context, how that affects members. If a scheme consolidates or a scheme gets into trouble, does government get involved in automatically finding a home, and then do the members then continue without losing any cover?
Bryan, the registrar has discretion to force a scheme to amalgamate. It doesn't happen often. It's hardly ever happened, but the registrar does have discretion. But what typically happens is, as a medical scheme starts to deteriorate in terms of its financial performance and its solvency starts to reduce, especially where it goes below the 25% that the CMS look at, the CMS becomes more active in terms of asking them for more information. They go onto a monitoring. But the problem is at a point you get into what I call the death spiral. If your scheme is doing poorly from a financial perspective, it's running big deficits, you have to counter that generally through high contribution increases. There's very little other way to do it. You either take away huge amount of benefits, and with PMBs, that there's not a lot of discretion to do that. So you typically find that schemes then go with high contribution increases. What then happens is that the young and healthy leave the scheme because they can. And then you end up with a scheme that's got a sicker, a worse risk profile. And that actually makes
and more aged as well.
Worse.
And more, not only sicker, but aged as well.
Correct. And typically that's exactly, as the young and healthy go, your membership profile ages even worse. Age is the biggest proxy of high claims patterns. And then you're then going to be in higher contribution. So you've got this continuing process of saying, how do you get out of what I call the death spiral? And at a point in time, you can't. And then it's too late. And then you're actually forced to either close or amalgamate. And we've seen that in the industry.
Kevin, I'm going to come back to that because people that are listening in smaller schemes need to talk to you about what choices they are. But very simply, we're going to take a break and ask our viewers, stay tuned, and we'll be back shortly.